So I love that you mentioned how you tackle wellness in the book and also in your bio and your other materials, but you come at mental health as a psychologist from a very holistic approach. I studied naturopathic nutrition in university. My father and my brother are pharmacists by trade. I have kind of like a decent understanding of the benefits and the pros and the cons of like Western versus kind of maybe traditional medicine. And I'd like to hear from you why you got involved with more of a holistic approach and what it means to you.
Such a good question, because I think, as I talk about enjoy from fear, when Descartes came on the scene, right? We're talking in the 1600s, there was something called the Cartesian Split as a result of his work and the theory behind it, which is the mind and the body are split. That's why it's called the Cartesian Split. So we started seeing the human being as a machine, the machine of the body, and the psyche, the mind, as something else. It is that split that really started our society from seeing us as a whole being, where what affects the body affects the mind, where what affects the mind affects the body. Quite common sense to me, but for many people it's not. They can't imagine that you have a headache because something happened at work, right? And something emotional caused your head to ache. Then I've seen it in real life where I've had clients in my office where they're talking and they were able to walk in my room, and as they start talking about their issues and getting to something very deep and traumatic, one limb won't work. They will actually become, partially paralyzed in the room as they're talking about something. The trauma is that significant. I also see it in more minor ways where somebody's talking about a childhood issue and their neck muscles will start flinching, their shoulder muscles, they might develop a tic. So of course, the body is affected by the mind is affected by the body. And that's my approach when I'm looking at working with any individual, that it's not just what you eat. It's not whether or not you exercise. It is not how well you sleep, just those things. It is everything. Your body will be affected by whatever you do. If you're in a bad home environment, you're constantly fighting with your partner, or you're feeling very lonely, of course you're going to be stressed. And what will result? So this is a mental situation, right? Emotional and a mental situation. But of course, one of the things we know, chronic stress results in elevated glucose, results in elevated cortisol. It can, result in diabetes and obesity, in heart disease, all these things where, of course, the interplay is obvious. But, and I address this in Joy from Fear, but there's something called pharmaceutical companies that that have gotten in the way, and insurance companies, where they're not the only problem, but they have certainly taken advantage of, instead of addressing the issue that is making a person depressed or anxious or stressed, let's look at what their life is like. Let's look at what is happening. Yes, they may need an antidepressant so they can get out of bed. Yes, they may need an anti-anxiety temporarily so that they can move forward in life and get out of the house. But what we really want to do is to understand the underlying issues. Because if we resolve the underlying issues, then what we've done is made the medications largely unnecessary, right? But in a society, you're in England, which you have a very different system than we do. Thank goodness, because in America, the pharmaceuticals, I'm not a big television person, but if the television is on and somebody's watching it near me, I'm seeing pharmaceutical commercial after pharmaceutical commercial after pharmaceutical commercial. They are making extraordinary amounts of money off of people's long-term well-being. And so in Joy from Fear, I'm again not anti-pharmaceutical as a whole. There are definitely times that pharmaceuticals are necessary, but when possible, we want to get to the underlying issue, address it from a body, mind, spirit approach, and do what we can to change whatever's happening. And I look at it like this. If you had a bullet wound, we wouldn't put a Band-Aid over the bullet wound
I have one
and
right
say,
now. I have one right here.
we wouldn't say, hey, sorry, you have a bullet wound. Yeah, exactly. Hey, you have a bullet wound. Here's a Band-Aid. Move on your way. Here's an antibiotic. No, a good doc would take the time to go in, remove the bullet, suture it, give you antibiotics, bandage it, and also find out why you have a bullet wound. Who shot you? What's happening, right?
Yeah, maybe you live in a
And
bad
so
place.
you may live in a bad place. Maybe your girlfriend shoots at you, right? And we need to, remove you from that situation. But we really want to understand what's going on. Notice how doing that takes more time, doesn't it? Doing that really results in a greater amount of a psychologist's time, a medical practitioner's time, and when we're in it for profit, time is something we don't want to use. Would rather give somebody a $40 bottle of pills than give them psychotherapy that will cost many times that, even though it would cure it in the long run and make the world a better place.
Well, on that note, was that your training? Is that how you kind of went through medical school or college, or however you learned your profession? Were you kind of indoctrinated that way to kind of blend into the system? And did you learn about holistic health outside of that system? I'm just trying to understand when you got into it and how it kind of like became your thing.
Such a good question. And I've done so many podcasts and nobody's ever asked me this. So I'll have to say that I think I was raised in a home. It certainly wasn't a hippie home, but I was raised in a home where health was important, not eating, products and off the shelves and refined cereals and all of that. It was just something we didn't do. So I think there's that piece of it. When I was in college for a business degree and then an education degree. So it certainly wasn't from there. When I was in my master's program, so that's, it certainly wasn't in my master's program. It was more, the basic tenets of psychology and within the school system at that point. Then I was in law school briefly. It didn't come from there. Then I was in the business realm for a while. It certainly didn't come from there. But in my doctoral program, which was quite an extensive program, I believe that many things awakened in me. And the program was Jungian based, as in Carl Jung. And he was a very soulful, introspective man. So certainly some of it comes from that. But then I think the other piece of it came from me just being naturally curious and paying attention to what worked for people and what didn't work for people. And I am also a person where my moral compass, gets stronger every year. So if somebody is being dishonest or disrespectful, anything like that, I really notice it, because to me, it's all about integrity. And so in our medical system in the US, I am not faulting the docs. There are a lot of great docs out there who really, really care about people. I fault the money-making machine of the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies and the people who sell for them and the advertisers, right? That, the media that take on the accounts. That is where the problem is, because people at the top are making tons of money. So let's bring it back, again, back to your question. There is something in that is inherently wrong. And you can tell, because I mentioned law school, I am a person who believes in justice. And to me, that is a very unjust system, throwing medication at people who want help. throwing medication at people who really want to have a high functioning life. Then they throw antidepressants at them, this at them, that at them, and they're not fixing the problem. Then the person feels more broken because now they're on 3 medications and it's not their fault. They are playing target practice with different meds, throwing things at people and hoping something works. But the patient is the one who ends up feeling broken. So as you can tell, I think as I developed as a clinical psychologist, I realized how very much is broken in the system. And it makes me angry. It makes me angry because people deserve, in America, we pay quite a lot for healthcare, quite a lot. And it's borne by the individuals or by the company in many, many cases rather than the government. And people pay a lot. And this is actually a true story that happened about a week and a half ago. I had a young man reach out to me from a university back east in the US. And he said, I read an article where you were talking about why psychologists like you don't take insurance in the US, because many good therapists no longer take insurance because the game the insurance companies play in order to not have to pay out on claims really wears out a lot of good clinicians, right? And he had faced that when he was suffering from a mental health issue, and he wants to change the system. So I spent time with him to help him understand what I did and did not know and helped him find some other sources to talk to. But I do believe, as with anything, when we stand by and do nothing and say nothing, we become part of the problem.
I really respect your views and your honesty. I would say in my experience, I feel like more and more people are starting to adopt that frame of mind where, the system is so broken now, especially in the United States when it comes to healthcare, that to continue would be I think it's a growing observation, would be suicidal. You're basically destroying the society, the society's health, and I think it's manifesting in other aspects of society too, not just the healthcare system, but also in politics, or also in certain capitalism related power structures and things. But to bring you back to the book and us, because this is a great conversation, and it really does really give a good base to what we're going to discuss, because we see the problem here now is that we're just so undereducated when it comes to health and our own well-being. Your book is designed to address that. This is designed to help people take control of one of the main factors in illness, mental illness, physical illness, is your emotions. How do you control your emotions? How do you work with your emotions in a way that you don't let the negativity overwhelm you and make you ill and sick, which it does? And how, so your book is actually helping people to manage what they have access to already without relying on medication and things to necessarily deal with that. And Joy from Fear, I love the title. I love the premise. I am a big believer in seeing things from a different perspective. So my recent couple of years throughout this horrible COVID experience that I'm sure there's some people who've had a great COVID experience. One of my friends got stuck on a tropical island in a resort and just had to, kind of literally surf through it for the year, right? So he had a great time. But for most people, we are seeing how fragile we are, how little we've spent on ourselves in terms of time and resources and attention, how little we know ourselves and how little we know how to help ourselves. So let's talk about the book, Joy from Fear. Essentially, you're talking about taking something that everyone experiences, which is mostly seen as a negative, right? When you get any kind of fear-based emotion, anxiety is one of the major ones, is the major one. how to kind of almost transmute that and kind of see it from a different perspective, flip your paradigm, so to speak, and use it to your advantage. Because, and let's just talk about this first part. Fear is actually a good thing, correct? It's actually designed to be
Absolutely.
helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Fear is a really, really good friend.
Yes. That's what I got from the
Yes.
book. So, can you
Yes.
help us understand why it's a good thing? Why does it even exist? And what happened? How did we lose sight of that?
Absolutely. And I'm going to pause for just a second because something you said earlier, I really have to address because your phrasing was so perfect. Even though you were speaking metaphorically about the cultures becoming suicidal in nature because of the dynamics that are happening with pharmaceuticals and people not knowing how to manage their well-being, and money running things rather than heart, soul, and intelligence, right? I had to say that you picked that perfect word because it's not just metaphorical. In the US, suicide rates are rising. They are rising also among our teenagers. And so it's actually a literal shift. We are going so awry that the mental health in the US is becoming suicidal in some very literal ways because that's spiking. So I just had to really pay attention to that, and thank you for bringing that up because the rates, partly because of COVID, but they were spiking before COVID. So again, I think that's important for all of us, no matter what continent you're on, to be aware that when we don't take things seriously and give people the tender, loving care and attention they deserve, that person may no longer want to be on the planet. And that's what suicide is. And so for me, that is heartbreaking. And it is one of the reasons. So now let's get back to Joy from Fear. It's one of the reasons I wrote Joy from Fear, because many people cannot afford in the US. It can cost $180, $200 to see a good clinician. Some are far more, some are a little bit less, right? That's quite a lot for somebody to pay out of pocket week after week after week. If you have a fairly good insurance program, you might be paying a $20, $30, $40, $50 copay. And you may not, I'm not saying that only good therapists don't take insurance, but a lot of people who take insurance, uh, anyway, I shouldn't say anything. So sometimes
Okay.
people take insurance and sometimes they don't. So I think the reason I wrote Joy from Fear is whether you're in therapy or whether you don't want to be in therapy and want to do some self-work, and or if you do want to be in therapy but you can't afford therapy, Joy from Fear is intended to be a best friend in your pocket, on your nightstand, in your briefcase, to help you understand you, to get to know you, and to know that you are not broken. You simply likely do not have the tools because our school systems don't give us tools. Our parents often didn't have tools, so they didn't know what tools to give us. And so people are limping around in a very busy, broken world. So, Joy from Fear, the premise is, when I was in doctoral school, something in my you're required to do, a dissertation, and I did a qualitative and quantitative analysis of fear. I made up my own research instruments, one qualitative, one quantitative again, and researched fear and went beyond my requirements for my dissertation because it became such a passion for me. I wanted to understand what caused people to be afraid, how what caused fear to transform into anxiety and stress, what made fear destructive in some cases and constructive in other cases. I had some theories, but I had to understand how that would work in the general population, how my theories would be borne out. And what I ultimately found, if we put it in fairly simple terms, is that fear is of course, with us for a very atavistic reason. It is designed to alert us that there is a threat in the environment. The body responds with a surge of cortisol and adrenaline, and we have what's known as the fight or flight response, which is actually a fight, flight, freeze, or appease response. So the individual has to decide, how best can I stay alive? Do I fight? Do I flee? Do I freeze and pretend I'm invisible or hope I'm invisible? Or do I appease and say, oh, please don't hurt me. Please don't hurt me. That works really, really well and worked really well for our ancestors who were, under constant physical threats in the environment. Maybe a tiger was after them, or a bear, or someone from another tribe who wanted their food. And what would happen, and this is how fear is really helpful to us, it alerts us to a threat. We survey the environment very quickly. We figure out how to best respond to promote our chances for survival. And then, once the threat is gone, we return to normal parasympathetic nervous system comes on board. We breathe, we relax, the system goes back to normal. And we do great until another environmental threat arises. However, in today's world, we don't have many actual threats like that. We live in our homes and we're generally safe, but unfortunately, we have perceived threats constantly, because in more primitive times, we had our tribe to rely on. We had our home environment, our people to watch out for us. So if we were short on food, they would give us food. If an intruder was coming, they would watch out for us. Now, with the destruction of the nuclear family and with people being increasingly mobile, we're often not with our families of origin. People may be in a place where they don't know anybody, may be so disenfranchised. We no longer have our elders in our homes in most cases. In the US, we farm them out to, buildings where they, live until they die with other elderly people that they may or may not know. They usually don't know them. And so by doing that, we have left people being not only very afraid of the future. Nobody wants to be a warehoused elder whose end of life is very inhuman. And so we're already setting ourselves up, even as 20-year-olds, not to look to a future of being 70 or 80, where we are loved and honored and respected for our wisdom. We are already looking ahead to say, as I age, things will be awful. I will be put in a diaper and my brain will, I'll have Alzheimer's and, this will happen and that. There's nothing respectful, nothing gracious about the way that most of our elders are now aging. So we've set up this fear of aging, right? Then we've set up a social structure where education is rewarded, but what's most rewarded is wealth at any cost. People will lie, steal, kill to get wealthy, to have money in the bank. They will step on other people's shoulders. That is so unsustainable because it sets up our society to be willing to kill people's psyches and physical bodies in order to get ahead out of greed. Now, I'm not saying this is something new to the 21st century. Of course, people have been like
Right.
that for
Yes.
a long time. But when we
Although
look
when
at how
we
many...
were maybe, if you go back a few centuries, we did have a lot more community and a lot more sharing going on. So.
We did, and a lot more respect for wisdom. There was more respect for wisdom than there is today. Many people today, and I think this is a part of the abundance of information, people accrue facts and think that that is wisdom, when really it's knowledge, it's facts, it might be intelligence, sometimes it's not at all. And we forget that facts do not equal wisdom. Just because you've read a lot of books and know all of the latest statistics doesn't mean you're being wise. And so in Joy from Fear, I promote wisdom. And here's why. When we promote wisdom, learning to discern between an actual threat, which is a fear-based response to an actual threat in the environment, and fear gone awry, which is destructive fear. Fear that's telling us that we are not enough, that we should achieve more, that we should do more, that we should be more, that we must be this, must be that. We are not pretty enough. We are not handsome enough. We are not young enough. We are not wealthy enough. That is all destructive fear. Chewing away at our self-confidence, chewing away at our self-esteem, which is different from self-confidence, and really making what is there that would not make you anxious? What is there that would not make you stressed and depressed? Now let's bring in social media, right? People look at Instagram and they see the man with the perfect beach body and the woman with the perfect beach body and the perfect home and everything that they are supposed to have, that they don't know if it's airbrushed or not, but they assume that it is not because they're comparing themselves. And that alone, that toxic comparison, and I talk about that in Joy from Fear, what I call toxic comparison. So we wake up and from dawn till dusk are comparing ourselves to other people in a way that makes us hemorrhage inside. It truly does. It makes us feel like we are not enough, that we are bleeding out our own being because we are not what somebody else is or what society says we should be, so that we can buy things. So now we get back to buying more things. So buy this makeup, buy this bulking material, buy this pill, right? You're never enough. And then you add on to that what we call doom scrolling. People who will go into social media and use it to find more news and more negative news and more negative news and more negative news. Of course, that will cause depression. Of
Right.
course,
But
it will cause.
why would we do that? I mean, because I know exactly what you're saying. I just want to know your thoughts. Why do people why do we resonate? Why do we do that to ourselves when we know it's not helping us? I mean, well, maybe we don't know it's not helping us. Maybe we're so
Exactly.
unconscious.
And that is exactly it, that we are so unconscious. Carl Jung says that who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. And in our society, we have become so accustomed to looking outside that to look inside, to do some introspective work, some self-reflective work, people don't understand that. They simply do not understand that. So when we teach people, you can buy something to solve this. Go buy an anti-anxiety pill, go buy an antidepressant. Then what happens is they begin to continue to look outside. And whether it's the doctors or the pharmaceutical companies, these are the gods that are telling them what to do. Fix it by doing this. I have a completely different paradigm. My paradigm is, wait a second, if you learn to go inside and slow it down, the fix might not be as fast as a pharmaceutical, but it will be your lifetime fix. You will learn to go inside yourself. And let's talk about doom scrolling, back to that, or people who put on the news, right? And they're watching these people yelling and screaming at each other about politics or this or that. And they'll sit there fascinated, captivated by the talking heads, not really listening to the message. And I've witnessed this, and it is horrific. Anyone with an ounce of common sense will say, this is horrific. I am much better off getting my news from a trusted source in print where there's not this stimulation going on of negativity with these people yelling at each other. So again, you're getting it visually as well as auditorily. And so we really need to learn that if something feels toxic in your environment, and I do this in Joy from Fear, it's one of the exercises, I say, look at your environment. If there's something in it, whether it's your TV or your use of the TV, that makes you more stressed, eliminate it or reduce it. If there's something in your environment that makes you feel good, whether it's putting on soft music or whether it's having a yoga mat out that reminds you to stretch and de-stress, then do that. But what does that take? It takes self-awareness.
And also it takes I would say the faith that the suffering, the immediate suffering of breaking that addictive cycle is going to be so worth it, because the results will be just, life-changing, and you'll feel good, you'll feel fulfilled. And what I'm talking about something specific here. I'm talking from experience. I would avoid pain, whether it's mental, emotional pain, by drinking. I would be addicted to things that distracted me from actually feeling those emotions. So what happened was, it took me a lot of convincing from maybe books like yours, or podcasts, or videos that I saw of people who were basically saying, look, it hurts. It's not a magic pill. There's no magic pill. It's something that you need. When you break an addiction, you get this kind of withdrawal phase. It doesn't matter if it's an actual substance, or if it's just a behavior. There is a withdrawal phase. There is that hump that you have to get over. And a lot of people don't have the faith to follow through all the way. It's like they feel the discomfort and they're like, I can't do it. I just can't do this. Go back to what you were doing before, which is really not going to help. And it's probably going to get a lot worse too. So, maybe you can talk a little bit about, some people you've worked with to help them overcome these kinds of behaviors, and what did they need to do, and how were you able to support them, and what did that look like to you?
Such a good topic, and you hit one of my favorite words, which is discomfort. We have become so acclimated to not being able to tolerate discomfort that the minute we feel discomfort, oh, I have a headache, I must go get a pill. Oh, I can't sleep, I must go get a pill. Oh, I had a hard day at work, I must go get a drink, right? Oh, I must go get something outside of me to fix this discomfort. And I say, it's just discomfort. It is just discomfort. So many people I've worked with started drinking or over drinking and this was part of the research that I did on fear that I really learned a lot about, because don't have addictions, I'm not a drinker and that sort of thing, that I really couldn't understand why somebody would go to an event and use alcohol as a way to reduce anxiety. I would simply say, well, don't go to the event, or go to the event and stay for a very short amount of time. Because if you need something to reduce your anxiety, that's telling you that something's not right for you, or that it's a growth opportunity. Right? So either way, if you use something to quell that discomfort, you're not noticing and paying attention to what it is that's causing the discomfort. So, people will say, I drink because it's a social lubricant. Right? And so when we do that, we are not paying attention to the growth opportunity, which might look like this. If I'm going to do a speaking event and something inside me says, oh my goodness, that will make me anxious, I will take an anti-anxiety med, right? I've lost the opportunity to practice in the mirror, giving that speech, or practice with a loved one, get up in front of the crowd eventually, and know I did it. Yes, I pushed through my discomfort. I didn't go around it. I didn't go underneath it. I didn't go over top it. I pushed through the discomfort, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so, and so when we look at that and say, okay, that's That's such a normal response to try to ease one's discomfort. But remember, and this is how I work with people, move through the discomfort. Just notice all it is discomfort. So if you're going to a party and you feel anxious and you want to get a drink, say, oh, I'm just feeling uncomfortable. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. This is maybe a new feeling, or maybe one I want to learn to tolerate more. So again, I'm not talking yet about the addictive piece, right? Because that's another piece and I will get to it. But this is what precedes it. And sometimes the other thing that precedes it is that we learned by watching other people self-medicate. So if you're a little one and you watch dad come home from work and go to the fridge and get a beer, you're learning that that's the right way to handle discomfort or stress. So some of this occurs on a pre-verbal level where we actually have to realize, where did this pattern come from? Not blaming mom or dad. There's no use in blame. The reason we look to the past is to understand it so that we don't repeat it. That's the only reason we look to the past. Some people say, oh, I don't want to talk about my mom and dad, for one of two reasons. They don't want to blame the parents, but we're not blaming it. And the other thing is, some people have their parents either up on such high pedestals or way at the bottom of a volcano that they don't want to open that door. And they think that time passed, so the issue should have passed. But the issues don't pass. Until we address them, chronological time will pass, but the issues will not change and morph. So we always have to go back and look at them. And again, not looking in order to blame anyone, looking in order to shift so that we can choose to create new patterns. So for somebody, let's say, who's involved in alcoholism, right? What you would want to do is to learn, what are my triggers? Okay, where did I get the pattern from? Well, maybe you got it from dad, maybe you got it from mom, maybe you got it from a brother, maybe you got it from a girlfriend. Who knows? But you'll figure it out. Maybe you embraced it on your, on your own, or from watching a sitcom where that was the go-to thing, right? So we want to understand where we learned it. Again, just understanding it. Now, then we want to come and understand our triggers. What triggers me to overeat, overdrink, overwork, overexercise, oversex, whatever it is, right? What are my triggers? For most people, it's stress. For most people, it's unprocessed emotions, right? So we want to identify our triggers, and it could be something as simple as, I'm at work, my stress has built up all day long. So when I come home and see my girlfriend or my wife, I need a beer because, or, a glass of wine, because I can't deal with that on top of everything else. I need something to self-soothe. Okay, so we know that coming home might be the trigger. So we now understand the trigger. Now let's have a replacement behavior. Again, see how this makes us slow down and become very conscious. So then we might come home and see our wife and say, or our girlfriend say, hey, hon, I need to go for a run now. I've had a really stressful day at work. Love you, care about you, but I need to go for a run. When I come home, I'll help you make dinner, or whatever it is, right? So we learn where our triggers are and how to come up with different responses. But as you said, many people start to get uncomfortable because they're used to the quick fix. And it takes the brain, we have wired our brains to this response pattern now. So now we just have to rewire the brain. And it takes us about 21 days to get the brain to begin to rewire. So about 21 days to get a new pattern of consistent effort. It's not just time. I mean, you have to work at it all of those 21 days. And then after about 66 days, it's really there. It's stronger. And at 90 days, after that first 21, so you take the 21 and then the 90, and you're probably set by that time. So that's quite a lot of time, 111 days, in order to create a new behavior. But isn't that worth it? It's not even a third of a year to create a behavior that will serve you for a lifetime.
Okay, so let me see if I can come at this from a devil's advocate position of someone who doesn't feel like it's worth it, right? Because that's, like you said, it's a lot of time. And by the way, I'm not that person. I very much believe in this. I do things that are difficult just because I know how I feel once they, become part of my life. But I've met many and some intimately who don't see things that way. They don't think about the long-term gratification, and they are very short-term gratification oriented. That's something I've struggled with myself, but it's also something I've struggled with kind of helping others with, short-term versus long-term gratification. And I think based on a study that was done of children who were told that they would receive twice as many sweets if they didn't eat the sweet that was put in front of them, as opposed to the kids, as opposed to the kids who just basically half the group ate the sweet first because they couldn't wait, and the other half waited for the two sweets. So and it just, they tracked them throughout their later years, and it was kind of concluded that the ones who waited had actually built their muscles for long-term gratification, which is really helpful in life. Because let's say you're investing in something, whether it's a business idea or a long-term relationship or some kind of fund that you have, like a trust fund. I think long-term gratification is really important. We've lost a lot of that. We're very short-term oriented, and it could be to do with all of the advertising, all of the messaging that makes us feel like we need it now. Amazon 1 hour Prime delivery kind of thing. So I'm just kind of riffing off of this kind of this approach that you have of, well, this is what you need to do in order to have a more fulfilling life and a life that you can control. But I'm just, all I'm saying is that there's a lot of people out there who just simply can't see the wood for the trees. What do you do in situations like that? I mean, I'm bearing in mind that people don't come to you for help unless they're ready to get help. So maybe we're talking about a totally different group of people here.
It's such a good point, and you're right. Impulse control has definitely decreased, and our ability to be patient. Research is really bearing this out, as you see with the one you're talking about with the sweets. There are so many studies that support that, and it's becoming more of a problem because the brain does, in neurobiology, it's called Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together wire together. So whatever we do more of becomes more hardwired in the brain. So you get on a certain highway and you will go on that highway without thinking about it because it's your highway. And so building detours, healthy detours, takes patience. But the more you use the healthy detours, again, the more they will become your go-to. And so when I see someone in person, I draw this out for them in the brain and I say, look, you just have this highway pattern, and all we need to do is work together to make this highway pattern much stronger and healthier so that this isn't your go-to. You are not broken. It is just the wiring in your brain. You can change this. We can build a do not enter sign here, and you will take the side highway and that will become stronger. Sure, sometimes you're going to get on the old highway just by sheer habit. But if we keep working on this detour, the healthy detour, you will learn it. You are right. Personality type is part of it. There are always people who will want the easier route, and they may always want that easy route for the rest of their life. But for many people, it is simply a matter of learned habits, learned instant gratification. And if we work at self-restraint, and I'll give you a good example. When I see something, I've done this for years. When I see something I really, really want, I put it in what I call my wish folder. I'll clip it out of the newspaper or write a note about it or out of the magazine, and I'll put it in my wish folder. And if I still want it in 6 months or a year, I'm fine. I can get it. I have never purchased anything from my wish folder. And exactly. And do I have an Amazon account? Absolutely not. You know why? Amazon won't want me to say this, even though my books are on Amazon, right? But because I would rather take the time to go to my local merchant, support my community, and remind myself that anything I need, I can wait for. Unless it's water and there's almost nothing I can't wait for. But we have taught ourselves, and I was listening to a podcast about this the other day, we have taught ourselves that everything should be here instantaneously. And so if an Uber driver is 3 minutes late, or we're in line at the supermarket, we get irritated and angry because we want it now. It makes us so intolerant now. For the people who don't have much self-control, self-restraint, notice this. It also makes you less patient with you.
Yes, I can imagine that. I mean, I'm
Anything
starting to
we
feel
do.
bad now because I use Amazon a lot. Now I'm like, I am impatient with myself.
Absolutely, because if we're impatient with others, if we are critical with others, whatever we are, be it good or not so good, it's one of my favorite quotes I came up with. Whatever we do, be it good or not so good, becomes more of who we are. So if we are angry, we become more angry. If we are kind, we become kinder. If we are instant gratification oriented, we become more of that. It's one of the reasons why people find it more difficult to read paperback books now, because it's too much work. It's to sit down and to really be at peace is too difficult. And exactly. And I have to say, for me as well, I have had to really work at turning things down in my own life, because I was noticing and still notice that I have a difficult time sitting the way I used to. Part of it is because I sit so much with my clinical practice, and I am a very action oriented person. But I do think we all, instead of blaming ourselves and saying, oh my God, I've messed up, I've been doing this, start looking at your life. And if you find that you're racing, if you find that you're being impatient, stop to breathe. That's one of the reasons Joy from Fear is filled with various breathing exercises. There's, I think, about a page and a half with various breathing exercises. And I know if I wake up in the middle of the night for whatever reason, I use my own breathing exercises
I was actually going
to
to
get,
ask you.
yes.
Do you get anxious? Do you have patterns of negative emotion that pop up now and again? And if you do, how do you handle them? How do you manage that side of your life? Is there a routine that you have? Is there a quick fix that you pull out your pocket? Tools?
Good question. So I have learned, and this is, an important piece we have, and it's in Joy from Fear. We have I go from the 5 emotion paradigm. We have fear, anger, joy, sadness, and disgust. They're all there for a reason, an atavistic reason, right? So some people call them good emotions and bad emotions, like fear and anger and sadness and disgust are bad, but joy is good. And then, so we have emotions, and then we have thousands of feelings. And then where they come from is the emotions come from the gut instant response. They go to the brain, where the brain informs us based on history. And then from there, we make thousands of emotions, right? As a result. So when I feel something, do I struggle? Absolutely. There are times where somebody will make me angry, and dishonesty in general, dishonesty, disrespect, unkindness will make me angry. I will get angry because that's all avoidable, right? If you make a mistake, just tell me. Don't lie to me, right? So that might, and if somebody really does a big, lie or big dishonesty, I might get angry. But I realize, and this is very Buddhist, that we don't want to hang on to any emotion, not even joy. And I can talk to you more about joy. It's an important piece. We want it to go through us, to notice it and let us go through. So if I get very angry, I will generally do my best to bracket it and then take it for a walk. And I'm a very fast walker, like practically a run. And I will take my anger for a walk. It's generally, I walk 5 miles a day. So generally, and there have been times where I've been angry enough that I need to walk 10 miles and do my loop twice. That doesn't happen very often. But what that does is it gets it out of my body. It allows me to discharge it. And then it allows me to also get to the roots of why I'm so angry. Sometimes it's whatever occurred hit an old wound, a childhood button, which is often happens for most of us. That's usually where our biggest owies come from, is some sort of life issue that occurred early on in life, a betrayal, something like that. So it gives me time to think about it. It also gives me time to formulate my healthiest response, which, is it something I need to tend to? Is it a discussion I need to have with someone? Was it just a passing thing where there's not really a discussion to be had? So anyway, yes, of course, no matter who you are, you will struggle at times of being sad or frustrated, things like that. The other thing, and this I would have to say, if I have a really weak spot in life, it would be anxiety or stress, because I like to accomplish a lot and I like to fit as much as I can into any day. So I will catch myself having shallow breath, having a little anxiety, saying, do this, do this, do this, do this. So my technique for managing that is to stop and breathe. Just notice, oh, you're pressing yourself. You're not going to get anywhere any faster. In fact, you're likely to make more errors. Just stop and breathe. And then you've broken the cycle. You've broken it. You haven't blamed yourself or shamed yourself, not for the anger, not for the anxiety. You've just gone, oh, this is happening. Let me pause and breathe. And then just by doing that, and where I really learned that one day, I'm a yoga teacher, a meditation teacher, but I also take yoga classes pre-COVID. And one day I was in my car racing to a yoga class. And I thought, this is ridiculous. You're actually racing across town so you can calm down. Why don't you just calm down in the car? And if you get there 5 minutes late, at least you'll be there in a safer way, in a saner way, in a healthier way, and you'll be walking your talk. And so I actually got there on time. But that's why when I teach a yoga class, if somebody comes in late, it's absolutely fine. Something made them late, and I'm glad they're there, and I'm glad they're safe and they can put their mat and find space. And I think that's how we can self-correct, not by blaming, not by shaming, but slowing down, being kinder to the self, kinder to others. And that's where I wanted to just talk for a minute about joy. I see joy differently than many people see joy. We have pleasure, which is feeling good in the moment, something great to eat, great sex, great something, right? Makes us have pleasure. It's a good emotion or good feeling, really. And then we have happiness, which is everybody's go-to. I want to be happy. Should be happy. Let me take some antidepressants so I'm happy. Happy is an inner sense of pleasure that is also reflected outward, right? So, but fleeting, it's transient, right? Joy, which is why the book is called Joy from Fear. Joy is yours. You have joy. Joy is mine. We are born with, and this is my paradigm, I've never heard anyone say it this way. We are born with joy in fact, I often burn a candle. We are born with a candle of joy inside us, a little votive. And and it's there. That's why you see children and they're happy and they're peaceful. And as we go through life, our little circumstances in life and owies, and parents say things and siblings say things and friends say things that hurt us, we get soot on the little glass container that surrounds the candle. And that soot causes anxiety and stress and depression and self-doubt. And for some people, it gets very, very black, very, very sooty, because they don't know how to slow down and wipe off the soot. And one of the things we can do, whether through reading Joy from Fear and doing the exercises, that's why I did the exercises, because you can't read a self-help book and have it change your life. You have to do the work. You can't see a therapist for an hour once a week and have it change your life. I give my clients homework. We have to do the work. We have to believe that we are worth the work. So when we do the work of cleaning off the soot, never blaming or shaming anyone, just cleaning off the soot, we become more peaceful. We become more in touch with our natural light, that inner joy that is just sitting there waiting for us to pay attention to it. When I'll notice it's not fancy, it's not glowing, doesn't have an, Hermes tag on it or a Louis Vuitton tag on it. It is just this beautiful little light that is saying, I'm here, I'm waiting, pay attention to me. And that's what our work is. Our work is, and I was born into a very Catholic family, but I came to resonate with Buddhism. I'm just a faith-filled person, a very spiritual person. Any religion that makes people happy is totally fine with me as long as nobody's getting hurt, right? But I do realize, and I wasn't raised with Buddhism, but I do realize that, having a Buddhist approach, a very Zen,
You
mindful
were raised with
approach.
Catholic?
Yes, Roman Catholic, yes. Yeah. And in a way that was very much, I'm not blaming the Catholic religion. It was just the way, I absorbed it, and my teachings resulted, which was listen, do what you're told, don't speak up, don't do anything, don't say anything, don't rock the boat. And sometimes, and be a good girl. And sometimes we have to rock the boat. Sometimes we do, to be who we are and to find out who we are. Sometimes we just have to rock that boat. And not only in rocking that boat do we learn who we are, and do we learn how to have inner strength and to grow our self-esteem, but we also learn that sometimes by rocking the boat and learning to be a good person and follow our values, which we sometimes have to find our own values and our own moral code, that then we give other people a chance to see what it looks like to slow down and consistently work on yourself, to polish the stone of who you are as a human being. And for listeners, you will never be perfect. I am not perfect. Nobody's perfect. The joy is in consistently working to, as Audrey Hepburn would say, to always be a first-rate version of yourself. And none of us will ever have that down, but we can always try.
Nice. That's beautiful. That's really well said. You said something about joy not being something you would hold on to either. What does that mean? I mean, surely people would be thinking, well, shouldn't I hold on to that? That's a good thing, right?
Yes. Isn't that interesting? It is the hardest piece for me as well, because we want to hold on to joy, but we can't say let go of everything but joy, right? And again, this is Buddhist philosophy, which is let them all go. And what you find is, as with yoga, if we hold on to the mat tightly with our feet, we're more likely to lose our balance. But if we put our feet firmly, even lift our toes, right? What we find is that by not clinging, we become more of who we are, and that we don't have to have. Because if I have to have joy, if I'm holding on to joy, then I'm resisting when sadness comes in. I'm resisting when anger comes in. I need that antidepressant because I must be happy. But no, if we're willing to let joy go aside because our parent died, or because we've lost some other loved one, or then we can say, oh, this too shall pass. This too is fleeting. Joy will return. Joy will return. It will be here. These things have just pushed it. I still have it inside me. Maybe the light is low, but I'm not holding on to needing it. I am making space for these other natural pieces.
Sure.
Yeah.
Interesting. Beautiful. And for anyone's listening who is an audiophile, there is an album by an artist called Mike Posner called A Real Good Kid. And it actually made me cry. It was such a beautiful album. It's basically chronicling his journey from losing his father and his ex-girlfriend to becoming a man. And in the process, he accepts it, and he allows it to kind of, fuel him to be, the man he was supposed to be. And I really appreciate that kind of mindset, where you don't run from it anymore. You just say, well, here I am, let's see what happens. I mean, I'm not going to run for the rest of my life. I mean, I hear you talk about integrity, values, principles, your own code of morality. I like this because it's what fueled me in life. It's something that I've always held very close to myself, and I think that had a lot to do with my childhood and how I was brought up. Probably yourself as well, I would imagine, because you seem to have had a good childhood with at least your parents were keeping all of those unhealthy things out of the house, or maybe principles and values were also part of that household. But it seems to me like it is, and I don't want to digress a lot from the book here, and I think we've really kind of covered a lot, but I will say this: values and principles to me are something that anyone can have, but I think as time goes on, it gets harder and harder, because they are, I think they depend a lot or heavily on how you were brought up and the kinds of things that you've experienced. And I feel like it's almost like Anthony Robbins said, and I rarely quote Anthony Robbins, but this is a pretty good one. There's a scale of being satiated and being desperate. And if you're in the middle of that scale, you're in trouble, because comfort is just the worst bubble to try to pop. It's tricking you into thinking everything's under control and everything's all right, but you're just stagnating in there. And I feel like if you're stuck in a comfort bubble, it's hard for you to start to see the world differently, and it's hard for you to start to build character, because why would you? Why would you need to? And until that bubble pops, you're not really going to have the fuel to want to do anything about it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there probably is a time and a place for when you're ready to actually accept the teachings from your book and other books and other people's, kind of like podcasts, wherever you want to get your information from. I personally feel like you need to be in the right place at the right time. And you'll feel it inside of you, the interest towards it, the curiosity. And hopefully, podcasts like this can really help to transition people through to the other side.
I agree with you quite a lot. The one piece, though, is that sometimes we don't know we're ready. And I remember, for me, I had a big epiphany. I was on an airplane, of all places, from Ireland, and I happened to be reading a book that I didn't necessarily read for self-growth, pick up for self-growth, but I remember reading a passage in it. Then the passage spoke to me, and basically I saw myself in the person that was being talked about. I said, uh-oh, you're really messing up here. You need a check, and you need to do something differently in your life as soon as you get home. So sometimes just having our eyes open to our eyes open, our ears open, our hearts open, we can realize that comfort, as good as it is, right, there's always room for growth. There is always room for growth. And I think it's really most about, who do you want to be as a human being? When you leave this planet, what mark do you want to have made? Do you want to be the wealthiest person on the planet? Do you want to be a drug addict? Do you want to be a great parent? Does it matter to you to have made an impact in the world? Does it matter to you? Some people don't believe in soul. Some people to the concept of integrity, which is one of my most important concepts, right? They don't even understand what the word means. And so for me, it's about, I always look and say, if this is your last day, right? How well have you loved? How honest have you been? How kind have you been? How would you have wanted to live this last day? Because none of us know if it's our last day. And so if we live every day, and I wake up in the morning and I just look at every day, whether it's gray or cold or sunny or whatever, I just say, oh my gosh, it's so glorious. And because it is. And so many of us have started taking life for granted because we live in a world that tells us people are disposable, things are disposable. Everything is disposable, and I feel very differently. I don't see people as disposable. I don't see products as disposable. And so I really try and live that. Talk about a body, mind, spirit approach. The way I deal with people, which is that you are not disposable. No one who's listening is disposable, nor is anything your leftovers, right? We don't want to be wasteful. We don't want to be wasteful of packaging. We want to be mindful, because whatever we do, be it good or not so good, we are promoting in the world. And if we are wasteful and treat people like trash, create more trash, we are part of the problem on a very elemental level. So I really believe in scaling things back. Not that I don't consume. Of course I consume. I love pretty things. Who doesn't? But I do try and be very mindful.
You don't
And to
consume
not.
from Amazon, so there's a start.
There's a start. Sorry, Jeff Bezos, I'm taking away from your billions, but I'm actually not sorry at all. I'm really, really quite proud of that, because, the more we slow down and create the world, because the more, again, taking back to really frequenting local markets, that's our community. We can't say we value community and then be a huge part. And I'm not demonizing online shopping as a whole, but we do take away from our community. And community is what makes us feel connected and loved and important and vital. So again, when we take it back to a holistic, really looking at the whole thing, we realize we need to, in order to save ourselves, to save humanity, to save the planet, we need to do some serious reevaluation. And it starts with us in little itty bitty ways. Itty bitty, you don't have to make a giant change in the world. I know when I walk, I drive people crazy when they walk with me. I pick up litter. Gloves, no, I pick up litter. Why? Because I have to. I'm responsible for the environment. It's not my trash, but I can't pass it up. And so, of course, every time we do that, we're setting an example for someone who did litter. Maybe they're thinking. So anyway, I think we can all make big and little changes that will be good for us, for children, for the planet as a whole.
Oh, I honestly can't top that. That's probably the best way to finish this episode. Very, very eloquently put, and I agree with you 100%. That's why Unleash Love exists, because I think bringing people together is, something that I can do, and I'm passionate about it. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate it. When your next book comes out, we should probably do another one. But,
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's been such a pleasure. And the release date is July. So
not long from
there
now.
You have it. Not long from now. So it has been a pleasure. And your listeners can find me at drcarlamanly.com.
carlamanly.com. Excellent. Well, thank you again. I hope you have an amazing weekend.